This is Healing at Soul Level with your host, Shawna Williams. Shawna is here to provide various forms of healing that are non-invasive, that promote relaxation and aid the body in naturally healing itself by using ancient healing techniques that have been around for centuries. So please welcome the host of Healing at Soul Level, Shawna Williams.
Hello and welcome to Healing at Soul Level. I'm your host, Shawna Williams. Bevin Niemann underwent a spiritual reawakening in her early 40s when she began studying with the Spiritual Arts Institute. This is where she realized how strong her intuitive and empathic gifts were. She is trained in coaching and conscious leadership and is the leader of a Meetup group of over 500 sensitive people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Welcome to the show, Bevin.
Hi, Shawna. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and be connecting with your listeners today.
Yes, I'm so glad that you agreed to be on my show because I was just beginning to learn a little bit about archetypes. And then I was like, wow, this is a lot of information. And then I met you.
Yeah, that was a fortuitous meeting there for us. And thank you for bringing me on today.
So explain to everybody, what are archetypes?
Absolutely. You know, I also would say that I'm newer to exploring this idea of the archetypes, although it is not a new idea for human beings. The word actually came out into language in the 1540s. So this idea of an archetype has been around for many, many years. And if you wanted to look at the textbook definition, it would be the original pattern from which copies are made. And so the way I like to look at it, Shawna, is that archetypes are powerful metaphors that help us to understand ourselves. They can be stories or visuals, art, music. They come through in a lot of different ways, but it's a way for us to identify with characters or ways of being that mirror our own ways of being.
Oh, okay. I mean, that was a really good explanation. So, can you give me a few? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I was going to say many of the stories since ancient times were passed down orally and then later in written form. From generation to generation. So these stories are ancient, as they come forth into modern times. So like the archetypes are kind of like stories that became that, and then that's been passed down. That's how it's come to us at this time, correct? Right. Okay. So one archetype that a lot of people are very familiar with, and there have been stories spanning in every culture, every religion, all the way up to modern times, is the hero or the heroine's journey. So that's something, we have movies about it. We have characters that are heroes or heroines. And essentially, this is a person who sets off on an adventure. And usually it's fraught with a series of challenges or obstacles that must be faced and overcome. It's definitely going to involve growth and learning and mistakes and sometimes triumphs. And then generally at the end, there's some kind of achievement or some goal, right? And so the hero or heroine's journey is one of our most long-standing archetypes. And, this reflects our own spiritual journey, as we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We come into this world and we're born into a specific family, and we have experiences and adventures, if you will. And we have strengths and we have challenges along the way. And we learn and we evolve and we grow. And so each of us plays out that hero or heroine's journey in the same way that these archetypal characters have.
See, I always knew I was part of those Disney movies.
Well, there's a reason that they resonate so much with us, because we see ourselves in them. And In more modern times, the author Joseph Campbell really dove into this idea of archetypes and mythology. And he actually broke the hero's journey down into this diagram of, first this happens and this happens, and they face, an evil influence, and they overcome that, and then this and this, and they come into, self-realization and so forth. And there's also a author named Maureen Murdoch who expanded upon that work because she believes that women actually experience a different kind of journey and different sort of challenges perhaps than men do. And she developed this model for the heroine's journey. And what's really interesting about this is that there have been, of course, throughout history, like more heroes' journeys than heroines' journeys. I think, when I was a child, there were only a handful of stories about women and powerful women and women who overcame things at all costs and so forth. And so, of course, I gravitated to that. I think as we come into modern times, we're seeing, more of that. We're seeing more empowerment. And that's a positive thing, is that women can see themselves in these stories and these metaphors as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's very good, because it's very empowering, which is what everybody needs, to be empowered. Very true.
Right.
So why is it so important, though, to our society? Other than the empowerment, is there other reasons?
Right. Well, a little bit later, I'll talk a little bit about Carl Jung and the collective unconscious, and I think that's a really interesting way to answer your question about, how we identify with these archetypes, both on a societal level as well as an individual level. Now, of course, we're all unique human beings. We all have our own story. But we also have shared experiences, and we've had shared experiences even with people who lived thousands of years ago and, people who live currently. And so feeling a sense of belonging, a sense of, I am validated by that. I understand that other people have walked this path. It's not just me. I think is really, really important. I think, you see that in social media now, where people get on and they share their stories, particularly, and other people say, yes, I've had that experience, or, I feel for you, or, hey, I'm pulling for you. And we need that as human beings. We, having a sense of belonging is one of our basic needs to be a part of a community. And so I think archetypes help us to pull together in that way.
Okay. Huh. It's funny, because when I sit here and listen to that, and then I start, relating it back to my life, then I understand it, more, and it's easier to understand, because as you said, we all go through that, but you just do it. I guess it's natural, and then, but whenever somebody puts it into words like that, it helps you to understand. And I don't know, for me, it's like, just having almost directions as to what I was doing, something that told me that it wasn't just haphazardly. I wasn't just doing something haphazardly, I hope that makes sense.
Right, that we have these powerful patterns. We have these powerful patterns that we sort of play out as human beings, and that's our shared humanity. I think is really, really powerful. Another archetypal story that everyone's going to be familiar with is the battle between good and evil. And this shows up in every culture, every religion.
True.
We have this duality, right?
We can talk about the battle of this. We're going to have to stop real quick and take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back to Healing at Soul Level, and I'm your host, Shawna Williams. We were just talking about archetypes, and when we left for the break, we were talking about archetypes that are like good and evil. So let's continue on with that, Bevin.
Absolutely. This sort of duality, this battle between this archetype of good and this archetype of evil has been prevalent through pretty much every culture and every religion throughout the ages. And it even extends into our more modern times. So if we look at let's say a more modern movie, like The Lord of the Rings, for example, You have a character, a hobbit named Frodo, who embodies this innocent, good hobbit from the Shire, and then goes to battle with these evil forces who want to take over the Great Ring and use it to control all of Middle Earth. And so, this kind of epic contest, between these two sides, the dark and the light, shows up as an archetype over and over and over. I would say another good example of a movie that does this, and I just remember seeing it in the theater and being just blown away, was Silence of the Lambs, where the character of Clarice is the investigator, and she goes in and she enters into, she's sweet and sort of innocent, and she enters into the world of Hannibal Lecter, who is anything but. And the interplay between these two characters, and what's so interesting about this archetypal battle between good and evil is that it's not only played out externally. You see it in politics, where one side makes the other side wrong and so forth. You see it in relationships between countries. We have allies and we have enemies. You see it played out internally as well. We all have this side of ourselves where we know that we have a moral compass and we're going to make specific, choices that will be in alignment with our personal beliefs. And then we also have this side sometimes which isn't always what we like to see, this darker side of ourselves, where we say things that maybe we don't mean, or we take actions and it hurts other people and those kinds of things. And so there's the battle of good and evil on every scale, and it's kind of reflected throughout all of society.
Wow. So So do you have like some examples of some modern day archetypes?
Right. So, we talked before about the hero's journey, and if you look at the Star Wars series, for example, you see Luke Skywalker as this seemingly like average person, right, who feels called to something larger. He just doesn't know what that is. And so he takes this adventure, and he follows and he goes from planet to planet, and he meets different people, and he gathers resources, and he has to overcome challenges. And then he meets a mentor in Yoda, and he trains, for the upcoming battle, which is also a battle of good versus evil, right?
Yes.
And interestingly enough, in this case with Star Wars, it becomes the battle with the father archetype as well, so that it brings in, George Lucas certainly used a lot of archetypes in his work. So that would be one, more modern interpretation of that. And I loved the movie that came out last year, A Wrinkle in Time. It was one of my favorite books by Madeleine L'Engle. And the leading character of Meg, and we talk about the heroine, how we're starting to see more of the heroine's journey show up in current times. And again, she was sort of this innocent teenage girl who then went off and took these adventures and expressed characteristics of herself that she didn't even know that she had inside. It brought out these different strengths. It also highlighted where maybe she needed to do some more work, and where she had doubts, within herself. And I think that aspect of the hero or the heroine's journey often shows up. It shows up for each of us as well as we go through life. There are things that we're very confident in, and then there are times when we go, I just don't know where I'm going, what I'm doing. Sometimes we have imposter syndrome and those kinds of things. And so, again, these archetypes become reflected within our own journey within.
You said imposter. I'm sorry, what was that you just said? Imposter journey or?
Oh, imposter syndrome. This is a place where people step into maybe a new role or something they've never tried before. And they think to themselves, who am I to do this? Well, I don't have the experience or the knowledge or the leadership, for example, to do this thing. And we feel like a fraud, right? So some people say, well, just step in there and kind of fake it till you make it, which is funny because it's probably how we do most of life, right? We don't know exactly what's coming, and we just we just go forward and then find out what we need to know along the way. But yeah, that's the imposter syndrome. And so it's a very common part of the hero and the heroine's journey to feel like I'm not good enough to do this. And then having to summon up that courage and that strength inside to do it anyway. And to step forth into that is a part of that cycle.
So that's not an actual archetype. That's more of something that you do while you're exploring archetypes, I guess.
Yeah, it could be. I guess if you wanted to call it an archetype, you could call it the imposter, which would be someone who's posing as something that they're not, or wondering if they're trying to be something that they're not. So it actually could become an archetype itself. It seems to be more of a feeling through that journey, though.
Okay. So that's almost, like you said, anything that you do new, you almost feel like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And then you find out, I could do this.
Yeah, we always look back afterwards and go, wow, I actually had skills and knowledge, and there were people and resources that showed up to support that. So that almost always happens.
That's true. So we're going to stop right here, take a quick break, and then we will be right back. Welcome back to Healing at Soul Level. I'm your host, Shawna Williams. Today, we're talking with Bevin Niemann, and we're talking about archetypes. When we left off, we were talking about the modern day archetypes, and her and I had a prior conversation about perceptive archetypes. And so I'd like for her to explain this to all of our listeners.
Thank you, Shawna. Yes, I actually, the work that I do is with perceptive souls. And the way I define that is perceptive means tuned in, to those things which are seen as well as those things which are unseen. And soul is really a recognition of our divinity, that inner spark within us, that eternal soul. And so, this is a powerful archetype for many people who relate to this. Perceptive souls can be intuitive, empathic, very connected, sensitive. And so what I did is one day I went to walk in the forest, as I love to do as a part of my meditative practice. And I just started receiving, sort of as a download, all of these different perceptive archetypes. I realized there's something very specific about perceptive souls that needed to come forth, that we do relate to some of the more traditional archetypes, but then we sort of have our own. And I wanted, if it was okay, to share just a few of those with you today that really relate, that I think really a lot of my clients and the people I work with relate to.
Okay, yes. I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So one of the ones that came through for me was called the energy scanner. And I think this is one that a lot of people who identify as an empath really resonate
I think that's
with.
Me. As soon as you said the word energy scanner, I was like, that's me. Okay, go ahead.
So this is where both subtle and dramatic shifts in the energy fields around you pop up on your radar. You're like, what happened? Something shifted and changed. And you may be able to sense energy in a lot of different forms, whether that's emotional or physical, environmental, mental, or spiritual. And tapping into the flow or the oneness is very easy for an energy scanner. However, people could be very porous and very open, so they take on the energy of other things, which is something that requires a lot of awareness, right? To understand, is this my energy? Is this someone else's energy? Yes. And often, particularly empaths, feel like they're not certain where I end and where another person begins, right?
Yes.
And so, there's a really important awareness here of just realizing, like, you're always tuned in and noticing and asking questions and being really curious about where is this sensation or this feeling or this thought coming from? Is this mine? Is it someone else's? And what I like to say is that taking in energetic language is just a language like anything else. It's like verbal language. It's like body language. It's just a way of noticing what's happening in the world around us. And so there's nothing wrong or right about it. But what you can do with that is then go, okay, well, this isn't mine, or this is someone else's, or I'm just noticing this. And then you can kind of let it pass by, as opposed to taking it inside. And I think this is really important for energy scanners, so that we don't become exhausted by all of that. And then sometimes when we're scanning, we're scanning, and we notice something about another person, we realize, we may be kind of encroaching on their privacy, their energetic privacy. And so if it doesn't involve us, we can just notice and then kind of move on, right? Because no one really likes to be read that way. So this is just one of the 3 archetypes, and one of the 13 archetypes that came forward for me. And I just think that it really seems to resonate a lot with empaths.
Yes, it does. I definitely do resonate with that.
The next one is a foreshadower, and sometimes this is known as a seer or a prophet. These are terms people are familiar with. These are people who have the ability to kind of sense into the future and predict what's likely to happen. And they're usually correct often enough to kind of be scary, right? They may receive messages through powerful dreams or visions, or just have an inner knowing about what's going to happen. Some of these messages may show up very clear, while others are more symbolic. So we don't always know exactly maybe what it means until after the fact, or until we get some kind of verification. Anytime we receive a vision, it could be one of infinite number of possibilities. So just because we see something doesn't mean it's exactly going to happen that way. It could, or it may not. It's just one of the things that can happen. And there are a lot of factors into play as far as people making choices that will determine what path something takes in the future. Though the one thing that foreshadowers really struggle with is, do I tell people what I know? If you see something for another person, do I tell them? And what I would say about that is, you can ask them, there was something I received for you. Would you like to know it? Would you like me to tell you? And if they say no, then just respect that, because this is, it's really important not to force something upon another person, or you could actually influence the outcome when you're not supposed to. So this is a little bit about being a foreshadower, and it's a responsibility because you can see things, but it's also a beautiful gift as well.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, I don't have that one.
Yeah, I mean, some people really resonate towards some of the archetypes and not others. What's interesting about it is I realized as I wrote these that I, at one time or another in my life, have expressed all of them. I don't express all of them all the time, but this one was more, prevalent at this point in my life, and a different one was more prevalent at another point. But it was interesting to find out that I could write these because I've actually embodied them.
Okay, I get it. I get that, yeah. I think it's happened in foreshadower maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, so not very much at all.
Right, it may not be the strength, but it's occasional.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, the third one I wanted to share was called the Awakener. And these are generally people who feel called to be something like a spiritual teacher or a mentor. They want to help other people elevate their consciousness, and they're here to help wake up the world, right? So it's a beautiful calling. They often have a lot of wisdom and feel like an old soul. They feel like, I've been here before, and I know all these things, and I'm bringing this forward. And what awakeners have to do is to be able to develop a very strong personal inner belief in themselves.
Okay. Well, we'll come back and talk about the rest of the Awakener after these breaks. Hello, and welcome back to Healing at Soul Level. I'm your host, Shawna Williams. Today, we've been talking about archetypes. And my guest, Bevin Niemann from Perceptive Souls, has been doing a wonderful job explaining it to me and all of you. So when we left off at the last break, we were talking about perceptive archetypes. And the last one we were talking about was awakener. So Bevin, if you want to continue on with that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we left off talking a little bit about how awakeners need to have a very strong inner belief. Because other people may not always understand their vision or their purpose. One thing to be really careful about if you resonate as an awakener is that you are not responsible for transforming everything by yourself. At the break, Shawna, you and I were talking about finding your tribe and connecting with other spiritual leaders and people who are doing this work. And,
yes.
We can feel a heavy responsibility, but we're not responsible for impacting everyone or the whole world. We need to do our part in our piece and then work with others to do their piece and their part of this as well. And making sure you're not sacrificing everything in order to give, and that you also do your self-care and that you have hobbies and a personal life and so forth. This is really important for those who feel called to be in service to others and help other people awaken and elevate their consciousness.
Yes, balance is definitely the key. That's something I had to learn because I just wanted to keep giving, and then there was nothing left. So, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I know that there was something that you're really passionate. I believe it was leadership archetypes we talked about.
Absolutely. My work recently is really diving into this idea of how do perceptive souls view leadership? And I did a recent survey on that. And, we can look around our world and see that there's a lot of despair, where there's negative energies. And, we're still struggling with things like racial and gender inequality and dramatic income gaps between the wealthiest and the poorest people. A lot of companies still put profit before human beings or before our planet. But then there's a lot of really great things that are going on as well. A lot of things are shifting and changing people's mentalities, and particularly mentalities in the business world as well. It's going slowly, but of course this is why we're here, right? Is to help make that shift. And so I've been looking at this archetype of leadership because obviously leadership is what directs a lot of our culture. It directs a lot of our business work. It directs many things in our society. And for many, many years, leadership looked like sort of top-down micromanagement. It was primarily masculine and European descent. There was a lot of control or asking people to be compliant. There was misuse of power. And so particularly perceptive souls don't work well within those kinds of environments, right? We look at all that and we say, this is not for me. And I think because there's been this sort of more traditional view of what leadership looks like, many perceptive souls, although they have really great skills in this area, have rejected leadership. A lot of them will say, I don't even like the word leader. I don't want to be that. And then again, I think that I've seen people, leading from this sort of position of authority because that's all they've ever had as a role model. You have to be sort of emotionally detached and make the hard decisions and do these things, even if you know in your heart it's not the right choice. So what I'm really interested in is how do we shift this definition of what leadership looks like? Because I believe that we can do better as a world.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're at a crossroads in terms of consciousness. We can either kind of continue on this path, which is sort of leading us down a way that's not aligned and it doesn't provide for even the basic needs for everyone on our planet. Or we can go this other direction where we can see leadership as something which is more conscious and empathetic and loving and caring. And I just really feel like perceptive souls have so much to bring in this arena that I've developed my entire coaching and mentoring model around this. I believe our world needs what we have to offer, and that we're a part of this larger awakening across our planet, and we have a role to play.
I agree. I mean, completely. This is a little bit off of the subject of archetypes, but as far as the leadership and everything goes, there's a new show on, I think it's Lifetime, and the guy is called Seatbelt Psychic. And he's like a Uber driver. And so he drives people around and then, what do you do for a living? Oh, I do this. What do you do? I'm actually a psychic. They're like, what? But it's such a good show. And he's introducing people to something that they either didn't believe or, had no idea was out there, and it's changed a lot of their lives. That's what they said afterwards. It's changed a lot of their lives, and it helps you to open up and be more open to things. I feel like when people are more open, they don't have that hard leadership attitude or quality or whatever you might want to say.
Right. Right.
When you're more open to things, then you're less judgmental. So, yeah. That just popped in my mind while I was listening to this. So I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, that was great, because I think, what I've learned through this survey is that a lot of perceptive souls are really nervous about being seen in their authenticity. And, for many, many years, if you told people you had these kind of gifts, there would be skeptics, or there would be people who thought you were evil, or, there were various consequences to being public and being seen. And what I'm excited about now is that in our society, people are more open to different ways of being than they ever have been before. So the fact that there's even a show like that on where someone can be openly a psychic and opening people's minds to that, I think is really amazing. And, there's definitely, as doing this radio show and being a practitioner, there's definitely some positives and also some downsides to being more public. But there's ways you can manage that as well. But authenticity and showing who we are is really important, so that we hold space for other people to be authentic. Everybody can kind of take off their masks and really be open about who they are.
Yes, that's very, very true. We're going to stop right here because this is a good stopping place, and take a break, and we'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to Healing at Soul Level. And I'm your host, Shawna Williams. Today, we're talking with Bevin Niemann, and we're talking about archetypes. This is something that she studies and she talks to Perceptive Souls about, which is also the name of her company, Perceptive Souls. And when we left off on the break, we were talking about leadership archetypes. So we're going to come back to that and let her finish up talking about that.
Thank you, Shawna. My work is moving in this new direction that I call leadership for a new era. And before the break, we were talking about kind of these traditional leadership models, which were kind of hierarchy and top-down decision-making and, fast-paced environments and internal competition and all those kinds of things. And that many sensitive and perceptive people really struggle in those kinds of environments. And so they may be reluctant to step into a role that's more demanding, or that might require them to make a decision that goes against their value system. Or if there's a lot of politics or conflict or game playing, those things going on in the workplace, you see a lot of perceptive souls moving into entrepreneurship because, and that's probably where you and I traveled that journey, just because, you get to set your own tone in your own culture. And it's not always the easiest path, but sometimes it feels much more in alignment than, say, the corporate world. Although I'd like to say that I think it would be important for some people to stay there and to really affect change. And I know that's happening. It's just it's a process of seeing those changes shift and so forth. And I think before the break, I also mentioned I was doing this survey about how perceptive souls look at leadership. And what was really interesting about that is I asked them to rate a list of leadership qualities. And I said, pick your top 5. And I wanted to share with you overall what perceptive souls think about leadership and who they believe that leaders should be. And the top quality that they chose were that leaders should uplift others and recognize each person's strengths. And I think that sometimes perceptive souls don't feel uplifted. They don't feel understood. And so it didn't surprise me that this was one that they would choose as the top leadership skill. And it's something that we do very well. We can see other people, we sense other people's strengths. We notice that. We generally come from this place of positivity and wanting everyone to succeed. And we enjoy collaboration more so than competition, although sometimes it can be competitive. But collaboration feels so much better for us because, especially like the energy scanner, we have no problem being in the oneness. And we like the oneness. It feels great.
It does.
And so uplifting others is so, so important in the leadership world. And then the other one is leaders who listen and learn from others. This is saying that as a leader, I don't know everything. I don't even need to know everything. I think in the past there was this idea that leadership is like you have to have all the answers. Well, leaders are not going to, and we live in a very complex time. So you need a variety of different viewpoints, and you need to assemble a team of people. It doesn't matter whether you're in a volunteer organization or in a corporate America or on you're developing your own entrepreneurial team. You need diverse viewpoints because this is what makes it much richer, and you're going to get a perspective that you didn't expect, and someone's going to say something that's like, wow, that totally shifted my entire perspective on this discussion. So this ability to listen, and you see out there in society, like when you see people, for example, on the news, and they're all talking over each other, it doesn't work. No one's actually listening. No one's actually having an intent to understand. So this is one of the qualities that perceptive souls really, really want in leadership. And then in conjunction with that is that leaders create a safe space for discussion and respectful disagreement. We have a difficult time right now being able to have respectful disagreements. You see it online where people are calling names and being hateful and trolling and doing all these things because we don't know how to accept that conflict can be really healthy and it can be a growth experience. But we don't feel comfortable with it. So then we do it in a way that's aggressive or passive aggressive as opposed to being positive. So great leaders will actually create this safe space and say everybody's voice is welcome. And let's listen and let's hear each other out and let's see what's there. Let's see where the commonalities are. Let's see, maybe this other perspective is giving us some information we didn't have before.
Yes, you are absolutely right with the perceptive souls. That sounds exactly like what I would like as well, And then, as you said, with the perceptive souls, when there's peace, then I feel more at peace because whenever there is chaos or arguments or, things like that, then I feel it too. So definitely I could see why that would be the number one.
Right. And there's a way for people to disagree without it feeling like chaos.
Yes.
Everyone kind of has to agree about how that happens. Like we're all going to speak without raising our voices. We're not going to point fingers and do blaming. We're going to, just listen to the idea, not attack the person. There's ways that conflict can actually be manageable and not be overwhelming for a perceptive soul. But most people haven't been taught how to do that. And so this is where leadership can come in. If you're a perceptive soul and you understand these concepts, you can actually role model this for other people.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Hope to do that one day.
Yeah. One of the other really important aspects of leadership for perceptive souls is people who walk the talk. We don't really like hypocrisy. Leaders should see themselves as a role model. It doesn't mean we have to be perfect. It doesn't mean we won't make any mistakes. It doesn't mean we won't have a good intention and then we won't follow through with it sometimes. But generally speaking, if you're asking me to do something, are you willing to do it yourself? Is a really big piece. And if I'm stepping into leadership, am I just saying things or am I actually implementing them in my own life? And this really comes into play, particularly with those who are called to do some kind of service in the spirituality world, is that we have to be doing our own inner work in order to be leading and teaching others. We have to be doing, whatever that is, daily meditation or spiritual practice. And it doesn't mean we have to be perfect. It just means that we have to have that strong intention to do that.
Exactly. You're absolutely correct. We're going to stop right here and take a quick break, and we will be right back. Hello, and welcome back to Healing at Soul Level. I'm your host, Shawna Williams. Today's guest, Bevin Niemann, has been talking about archetypes, and she has given us so much information about it. But you can learn more by contacting her at Perceptive Souls. Bevin, can you tell them how to reach you and what other modalities or offers that you may have?
Absolutely. My website is perceptivesouls.com. And if you go there, you can actually click on the Learn and Connect tab. And if you're interested in the perceptive archetypes, you can receive a free email series, which will introduce each archetype to you, its lesson, its information. So if that was something you were really, really curious about, I do have that as a resource. And the other thing is, you mentioned at the beginning that I run a local Meetup community, which is called Perceptive Souls. And we host live workshops every other month here in the Metroplex, generally in the mid-cities area, so that people from both Dallas and Fort Worth can participate. It's a great place to meet other like-minded people. We have amazing conversations just like this. And so I invite you to join us if you're so inclined. I have a couple of programs that are coming up. The first one is Confidence for Reluctant Leaders. We've been talking about how Perceptive Souls feel really called into service and sometimes into leadership, but are reluctant to do so. And in this group program, we'll be connecting and supporting each other and learning some practical skills. And then I wanted to let everyone know that there is a wonderful retreat that I'm co-hosting with Alan Seal from the Center for Transformational Presence called Soul Mission. So if you do feel this strong calling within, but you're just not certain what that comes from or how to articulate that, this weekend retreat will help you get very clear about what your soul is asking for, and you'll be able to take some next steps to follow your heart and your soul and to serve. This is coming up in February, and it will be hosted in Grapevine, so right here in our local community. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved with me. I also do individual one-on-one personalized mentoring for Perceptive Souls around leadership, around relationships, career, a lot of different topics. So if you go to perceptivesouls.com, there's many ways that you can get connected with me. And we'd love to learn more about how this archetypal research and information has impacted you today.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So I want to just reiterate that in order to reach you, we would go to perceptivesouls.com and just go on there. That's to click on. You offer services that's also listed on your website that they can check out, correct?
Yes, absolutely. There's a section that says, let's work together. And they can go there and see all of the different ways to get connected with me.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for being on my show today, Bevin. This has been great. I've learned so much about archetypes. I mean, a whole lot more than, the little bit that I knew to begin with. And I just want to tell the listeners, again, contact her on perceptivesouls.com. And you can also email her at tunedin, that's TUNEDIN, at perceptivesouls.com. So tune in next week to hear about brain balancing with my guest, Christine Licio. And to listen to the podcast for this and other past episodes, or to book Reiki services and Akashic record readings with me, visit my website at in-di-goh.com. If you have a healing modality that you'd like to share, then you can email me at shawna@indigoqi.com. You've been listening to Healing at Soul Level, and I'm your host, Shawna Williams. Thank you for tuning in. Love and light.
This has been Healing at Soul Level with host Shawna Williams. Listen each week as Shawna will help you discover the different healing modalities and how to use them in your everyday life, right here on Shawna Williams' Healing at Soul Level.